Saturday, February 22nd, the fight card of the century is live on DAZN. This absolutely stacked Riyadh season card has big stars fighting throughout the night, including heavyweight puncher Big Bang Zhang, the sharpshooter and one of the best talents in the world of boxing, Hamza Shiraz, and one of the best young pound-for-pound fighters in the world, Shakur Stevenson. And it is headlined by the undisputed light heavyweight rematch between Beterbiev and Bivol. Also on the card in the co-main event, Daniel Dubois, fresh off the back of his destruction of Anthony Joshua, defends his heavyweight title against Joseph Parker. And me and the Pain Game lads are going to be live as your alternative commentary on DAZN all night long. You'll find this on the DAZN homepage, so if you haven't already, go to DAZN.com/TrueGeordie and buy now. Once you're in, just click my thumbnail, sit back, grab a drink, and watch the best night of boxing ever. And with so many amazing fights, this live stream is guaranteed fireworks. You do not want to miss this, so go to DAZN.com/TrueGeordie and buy the pay-per-view now. So I'll see you there Saturday, February 22nd for the fight card of the century, live on DAZN. Welcome back to the Pain Game YouTube channel. Today we are talking the fight card of the century predictions. I'm doing the main event and the co-main event. And remember, we're going to be live on Twitter, on YouTube, and on your alternative commentary for DAZN throughout. We're starting early. I think we're going to start the Buatsi fight, so it's going to be like a 7-hour stream this. So come and join us if you can. And I'm going to start with my Dubois versus Parker prediction. Heavyweight world title fight. The winner will fight Alexander Usyk for the undisputed title. It's all to play for here. And what I love about these two fighters is they've both come back from tough defeats where after they were beaten, people wrote them off and said, right, they're finished at world title level now. And now here they are in a world title fight. And not just that, it's in the middle of fights. They've both shown a lot of resilience after, you know, they were finished. Where you look at Dubois versus Hrgovic, for example, Hrgovic really poured it on strong early in that fight. Dubois overcame that adversity. And then you look at Joseph Parker, who was dropped multiple times by Zhang and still managed to get the win. These lads are to be taken seriously. And Daniel Dubois' last fight really showed everything that he does well, in my opinion. You know, thunderous punching on the front foot, aggressive, relentless. It was beautiful. And I don't want to take anything away from that performance because it was one of my favourite performances from an English fighter ever. But AJ didn't necessarily make it as hard as he could have done, right? He fought in a really bad way. We all know his defense was shocking. Joseph Parker will not be that defensively irresponsible, right? We've seen the way he fought Deontay Wilder. High guard. He ain't going to be just giving you his chin like that. However, I do think Daniel Dubois has some things that Joseph Parker, even as experienced as he is, wouldn't have seen before to that level. The fact that his jab is that powerful and he can punch as hard as he can for the duration of the fight pretty much. It's not normal to be punching that hard late on against Hrgovic and Miller. It's just freakish. And I'm not sure, as much as I like Parker, that he has any traits or attributes that I would label as freakish. And I actually think Dubois is getting better, which is a scary thought, to be honest with you, because of his age. You know, he's coming into his prime now. And we've seen against Hrgovic, yeah, he got caught early on, but he eventually figured out the distance. And against AJ, he managed the distance much better. We're seeing improvements each fight. Parker, on the other hand, is kind of going through a renaissance of his career where he's rebuilt himself into a different fighter. In his first fight against Chisora, he was getting walked down a lot. He was even dropped in the first 10 seconds. And that ended in a split decision, which needed to be put right. So he went away, he put some muscle on, and he started really punching with a bit more spite, a bit harder. Found it a lot easier to control Chisora in the rematch and be the boss in the ring rather than just getting bullied a bit, you know. And this was the new and improved Parker 2.0. He's an underrated counter puncher. You know, he walks fighters onto shots, and that could be something that Dubois really needs to watch out for as he closes the distance. Parker isn't the hardest hitter in the heavyweight division, but he hits hard enough, and it's not something where you can take his power lightly by any means. And I like the fact that Parker doesn't need everything his own way to get a win, right? As I said, he was dropped by Chisora early on, he was dropped by Zhang. He keeps coming back for more. That's a fucking good mentality to have, especially in a fight with a puncher like Dubois, where you know you're not going to get it all your own way. You are going to have to come through fire. But we are firemen! Just a little Teddy Atlas reference there. I wouldn't say Joseph Parker has an at review in his game that is like the best in the heavyweight division. He hasn't got one thing where like he does that better than anyone, but he does everything good. He's a great all-rounder. In a game of rock, paper, scissors, which boxing often is and styles make fights, that means he's a difficult night for most fighters. And from listening to Joe Parker and his coach in interviews, they are leaning on that mental resilience that he has as a big advantage for him, because they don't think Dubois has that same mental resilience. They clearly think he's an on-top fighter who was fantastic when everything's going his own way, but when you create the circumstances when it's not going his way, he will mentally break. Now the question is, can they create those circumstances? And if we look at the fights that Daniel Dubois has lost against Joe Joyce and Alexander Usyk, the Joe Joyce one for a start was when he was very young, so I do think we have to take that with a little bit of a pinch of salt. He was fighting a much more experienced boxer at that point. Joyce was in his prime at the time. He is a massive heavyweight and has a great jab and just kept throwing that jab, pressure from the get-go. And when Dubois would return fire, Joe Joyce at the time, as in his prime, had a granite chin so he could absorb the damage and just keep moving forward. Dubois was on the back foot a lot in that fight. And Usyk also used a consistent jab, just constantly peppering, throwing that out there to get Dubois moving backwards, second-guessing himself. But where Dubois was able to connect with Joe Joyce to stun him occasionally, he couldn't really do that with Usyk in the same way, because Usyk did not stop fucking moving, man. And Usyk kept feinting Dubois and keeping him guessing and second-guessing himself. Dubois is a great instinctive fighter. He's animalistic. He's a fucking beast in there. But the more you've got him thinking and the more confused you can make him, the better. Like, keep him reactive instead of proactive. You see it in AJ, he was proactive in that fight. In Usyk, he was very reactive. There was a lot of confusion, I think, because who isn't confused by Usyk, for fuck's sake? And Dubois was even dropped with a jab in that fight, which, I mean, speaks volumes about the level that Usyk is on. Fuck me. The common denominator between those two defeats for Dubois is that they did not let him settle. And that seems to be something that he learned from those defeats and implemented on AJ, because I think he was very much in that same state of mind of, I ain't gonna let you fucking settle into this fight. So is Joseph Parker capable of doing the same, of starting fast, constant pressure, throwing that jab non-stop and pushing Daniel Dubois backwards from the get-go? I guess it's possible, but it's not what he's been doing lately. Against Wilder and Zhang, who are also big punchers like Dubois is, he was quite tentative to start off with. He was feeling them out. He didn't want to go to war too early when they were at their most dangerous, naturally. You wait for them to fade a bit and then go after them in the later rounds, which was a very solid game plan and worked really well. The problem is Wilder and Zhang are not Daniel Dubois. Wilder in that fight, in my opinion, was pretty mentally broken and did not have it in there to really go after it. And Zhang, despite actually being very, very dangerous, does not have the gas tank to stay with you later in the fight. Daniel Dubois has way more in the tank than those two, in my opinion. Dubois isn't just going to fade like those two did, energy-wise, at all. So where you might want to feel him out early and take your time and then get to the later rounds, I understand that. But, like, if you don't control Dubois early on in this fight, you might be asleep before you get to those later rounds. Dubois is like a fucking bull, right? He's charging at you, and you need to tame him. Otherwise, you're going to get the horns. And even in his win against Chisora, I felt like Joseph Parker still wasn't as aggressive as he could have been in the rematch. When he did get the better of him, he does still stand off and let you into the fight sometimes, and it's going to need to be perfect. Because if you look at the part of the fight where Hrgovic was beating Dubois, it was when he was throwing constantly, putting the pressure on. He wasn't standing off him at all. And I get that avoiding the, trading too much with Dubois early on when he's at his most dangerous is a sensible thing to do. But Dubois just isn't going to give you a choice. Like, he doesn't fuck about. We've seen the way he is. He's coming straight forward from the first fucking bell. He will not do what Wilder and Zhang did. You will not see him sitting around like Wilder did, waiting for the fucking knockout to land in his lap. No chance. And because Dubois is the slightly bigger man, the longer reach, a thunderous jab, if you do try and box him at range, that could be a recipe for disaster as well, because he could beat you in that exchange. So both ways of fighting Dubois for Parker, for me, are a bit of a nightmare. They're both really hard ways to win. Fight on the back foot, he's going to have an advantage. You go forward, you're going to take some power shots, big time. But I think at least if you go forward, which we've seen in previous defeats for Dubois, and you throw combinations, you give yourself a chance. It's Russian roulette. You're fucking rolling the dice. But at this level, you have to. We've seen with AJ and Dubois, if you let this guy build up momentum and don't push him back early on, you will be slaughtered. And there is some things that I think might work for Parker. Like, I think he's got a nasty uppercut. I love his uppercut. And Dubois has a tendency to lean over his front foot when he gets a bit carried away. You know, he needs to look for those shots, but he needs to throw multiple punches, you know, throwing combinations. If you miss the first one, land on the second and third. Give yourself the best chance possible. And it's easy to say that when my chin isn't on the line. I would not like to try and do that to Daniel Dubois. Fucking hell. But with Parker claiming he has a slight speed advantage, maybe that could pay dividends for him in these exchanges. I just can't see him doing what Joyce and Usyk were able to do, because I think he's going to have watched that AJ fight and thought, fuck trading with you early on. Like, I need to be cagey, and it's his nature to be quite cagey as well, Parker. He's had to learn to be a bit more aggressive as he's gotten older. And I look at the attributes of a Joe Joyce, who is a big, strong, huge heavyweight with an enormous reach, and I'm like, well, that's Joe Parker doesn't have those attributes. Usyk is extremely quick-footed. You know, his stamina is ridiculous. His speed is insane. Like, Joe Parker can't compete with those attributes either. Again, I said he's not bad at anything. He's a great all-rounder, but he isn't going to have those advantages that those two fighters had on Dubois. Not to the same degree, anyway. And on the flip side, as I said earlier, Parker has been dropped twice in his last fight, and to be fair to him, he showed a lot of heart coming through that storm, getting back to his feet, and overcoming Zhang. But where Zhang can drop you and not have enough energy in the tank to finish the job, Daniel Dubois has lots of energy. When he hurts you, if he does, you're fucked, basically. So Parker's margin for error here is really slim, you know? If he gets wobbled, I don't see a world in which Dubois doesn't take him out. He needs to be perfect. And that's despite the staying power of Joseph Parker. Like, I'm not underestimating that. I just really rate Dubois. And Parker's last defeat was ironically against Joe Joyce. And he was sick during that fight. He said that. I believe him. I don't think he was 100% when I watch him in there. But there is some cause for concern there when I look at what Dubois brings to the table and what he struggled with in that fight, Joseph Parker. Joyce came at him immediately, was chasing him around the ring, hurt him early, before eventually finishing him. We've seen Daniel Dubois fight like that before, very recently. He does not have a feeling out process. And to be fair, Parker can sit there and go, yeah, well, at least I went on it on my shield. You know, we've seen Dubois quit before. And fair enough, like, he has got the big balls, Parker. There's no two ways about it. But I look at the way they've both been beating, and I look at the attributes Daniel Dubois has, and I think he can follow a blueprint to beat Joseph Parker more closely than Joseph Parker can to follow the blueprint to beat Daniel Dubois because of those attributes. Not to mention that monstrous performance Daniel Dubois just put on against Anthony Joshua, where he was cracking the head of AJ back to the point where AJ was probably looking at the lights up above and then setting up his powerful right hand. He's coming off the back of 3 devastating performances where he has wrecked 3 very good fighters. I don't think I could pick against Daniel Dubois right now unless he was fighting Alexander Usyk again. That's how impressive he's been lately. So I'm picking Daniel Dubois by knockout, which I feel a bit guilty for because I really like Joseph Parker. He's like one of the nicest boxers I've ever met, but they're both good guys. May the best man win. On to my Beterbiev versus Bivol prediction. It's very rare in boxing we get to see 2 pound-for-pound level fighters go at it who are so perfectly matched. You know, what one does well, the other one struggles with. On both sides, they really are each other's kryptonite, and they bring a lot of problems for each other at the table. Beterbiev, so powerful, such an engine on him, and just ruthless aggression. He will keep breaking you down piece by piece until you wilt under that pressure. But Dmitry Bivol is a defensive genius and has unbelievable feet who can tame that bull that is Beterbiev at times. And in that last fight, despite losing, there was times where I think his level went higher for periods in that fight than Beterbiev's did. But he just didn't have that consistency, in my opinion, that Beterbiev had in that fight. It's one thing doing it in spurts. It's another thing just constantly keep going for it. And Beterbiev was so good at that. And the fact that Beterbiev did that at 40 years old, you know, through so many, hundreds more punches than Bivol. Off the back of a knee injury, which kept him out of the fight originally, where it had to be delayed. This time, he's doing it with back-to-back camps, allegedly no injuries this time. We might even see a better version of Beterbiev. One thing's for sure, we definitely need to see a better version of Bivol. Bivol just needs to do what he did last time, but for longer, as I've said. The problem with that is the more you engage engage with Beterbiev, the more you throw punches, which he's going to need to do a lot more of to prove to the judges that he is winning these rounds, the more chances you give Beterbiev to catch you. And part of the reason Bivol didn't throw as much last time, in my opinion, as what he needed to, is because he was too busy hiding behind his fucking guard. And it's a hell of a guard, but Bivol was reluctant to throw as much, in my opinion, because he needed to have that guard there to protect himself. I mean, the devastation that Beterbiev is capable of, he didn't want to risk it too much. Just to throw a punch, to get that punch back in time. There's no guarantees when you've got someone with the timing that Beterbiev has. And he's clever, Beterbiev, because he throws these soft sort of light punches just to get you reacting, just to get you to open up, and he's just priming you for the big shot. And Bivol's hands were up and defending himself so much that his hands swelled up like a fucking watermelon from taking that much of a pounding last time. I don't know if I've ever seen that in boxing before. And he must know now, I need to want to win this more than I fear being knocked out. Because he didn't take enough risks last time. The last 3 rounds, man, were just him covering up for dear life. And you're just like, this ain't the look of someone winning a title fight, bro. Even on the rounds that Bivol won, it was a lot closer. Beterbiev was still trying to have success. There was rounds Beterbiev won, which were just so one-sided. You can't have that in this fight. As much as a lot of people thought Bivol won, you can't argue with that. That's just obvious. And it's going to be even harder mentally because now he knows what he's going in there with. And that might help him a little bit confidence-wise. He might think, you know what, I went in there, I survived. But sometimes that's not how it goes. Sometimes when you go in there and you realize you're in there with the real shit, you feel less confident going in there again. Just ask Tyson Fury. Look at the way Tyson Fury fought Alexander Usyk in the rematch. Give it the big one about how he was going to stick it on him, demolition job. He fought the most defensive fight of his career because he knew, if I fuck around here, I'm getting knocked the fuck out. So I ain't taking hardly any risks. And that is the difference between champions and very good fighters, is the champions are willing to take all the risks because they want to be champion more than they're scared of being beaten up. Look at the way Alexander Usyk fought a much bigger man in Tyson Fury. He took all the risks. Throwing punches constantly, going after him. The same way Beterbiev did against Bivol in the first fight. And I'm not saying aggression alone is enough to win a boxing match, right? I understand you got to be landing and it's the one who lands more. But the reality is, Bivol didn't throw anywhere near enough fucking punches to give himself the chance to land more punches than Beterbiev. I don't give a fuck what the stats say. When you watch it, you can see. And credit to Bivol, he has been talking the way you want him to talk. He said before the rematch, I am going to leave it all in the ring this time. I didn't give 100% last time. This time, I'm giving 100% because I found out the hard way that style was not enough to get the win over this man. I'll be honest, I'm just not sure I believe it. The first time you're in there with him for the undisputed title, you don't know if you're ever going to get this chance again. That was the fight to give everything. That was the time to show us that you had the courage to go out on your shield, to do whatever it took to get that belt. And you didn't. So in order for me to believe he is capable of this, he's going to have to show us this in this rematch. Because I don't believe it yet. I just don't see how he can go from that level of negativity at times to then being aggressive enough to outland Beterbiev over 12 rounds. And I also think if Beterbiev can get going a little bit earlier, he can enact the fading of Bivol, which we've seen in those last 3 rounds, earlier and potentially get him out of there. And despite how negative I'm being about Bivol, I rate him so highly. Like, he is unbelievable. I just rate Beterbiev more. And I think that the aggression and the power that he has and the fact that he will have learned things from that first fight as well as Bivol. A lot of people are giving Bivol, well, he will have learned from that first fight yet. So will Beterbiev. And as great as Bivol is, I think you don't get into a ring with Beterbiev 2 times and not get knocked out. I'm picking Beterbiev by knockout. But I love this fight, man. And I love both of these main events, right? They're both main events to me. Parker Dubois, Bivol Beterbiev. It is going to be an epic night of boxing. And me and the lads will be live throughout this motherfucker because I can't wait for this. It is Boxing Christmas, honestly. We're going to be live on Twitter, X, YouTube, and DAZN alternative commentary. If you want to buy the pay-per-view, please use our link. It really helps us put back into the show and keep these live streams coming for you lot. Appreciate everyone who does that. If you haven't already, hit the like button, subscribe to the Pain Game YouTube channel, and I'll catch you on the next one.